very welcome to this joint webinar with ourselves at the European Joint Programme for Soil and EUFRAS, who you're more familiar with as members. And I suppose to start off, we'd like to thank EUFRAS for the collaboration in terms of putting on this webinar. The aim of the webinar this morning, it aims to promote the outputs of EJP soil projects, specifically sustainable soil management practices, and to share those with you as advisors of farmers and representatives of your respective countries and industries. So I'll spend a few minutes just welcoming you and setting the scene before we'll move forward to our two speakers today. And there'll be plenty of time for questions as we move along. Please use the question and answer. Put your questions in there, and we'll endeavour to ask those questions and have some discussion with both our speakers this morning. Okay. So, what is a European Joint Programme? To start off with, so it's our European Joint Programme is based on soil, agricultural soils in particular. So that's what EJP Soil deals with, and it's a co-fund action. So some of the funding is coming from European funding, and the remainder is coming from the respective countries. So obviously the countries that are involved in this co-fund, which nearly every country in Europe is involved, are interested in the research that's being performed and the outputs more so for various stakeholder groups. Research to support policy is probably one of the biggest aims here, but obviously this research is supporting the primary end user, i.e. the farmer, or you as an advisor as well. There's 26 institutions involved across 24 countries in Europe, and you can see there on the map in terms of who's involved. We're covering a lot of geography, a lot of different pedo and climatic zones, and a wide range of activities are involved as well. In terms of the focus, our focus in EJP Soil is climate smart and sustainable agricultural soil management. Many different aspects of that are covered. It relates to policy in a very concerted effort to support policy, I suppose, from inception right through the policy cycle to implementation. And I will say that the agricultural soil policy landscape has changed quite a lot over the past 3 or 4 years since this project or program of work was written. It's really changed. For example, from the point of view of carbon, the certification for carbon removal framework, the soil health law or soil monitoring law and resilience law, the CAP has come out and been renewed, the nature restoration law. So there's quite a lot of change in the policy landscape, for which I suppose the EJP Soil has been responding, supporting, and interacting, I suppose, to make those policies more coherent and to use the scientific knowledge base to guide the policy development. In terms of carbon sequestration, that was one of the asks when we discussed this with EUFRAS and the EUFRAS executive. What would be appropriate in terms of how we could discuss, inform you here this morning. Carbon sequestration came to the fore. And one of the key areas that EJP Soil and the projects, specifically this slide from the Carbosec project, what we've been looking at is, what's carbon sequestration versus carbon loss mitigation? They're two very different things. If we think of business as usual and baseline, there's carbon being lost from our soils through tillage operations, through drainage of peatlands, etc. However, how can we transition those soils to better management so that they can pull carbon from the atmosphere and store it in the soil? And carbon sequestration, the process of transferring carbon from the atmosphere into the soil through plants and other organisms, which is retained in the soil as organic carbon, resulting in a global stock increase in the soil. If we think about the measures to enhance carbon stock, so take cover crops, for example, it could be a case of carbon loss mitigation, so reducing the overall loss. If we don't, I suppose, enhance, implement, adopt better measurements or better managements in terms of fertilizers, organic manures, in I suppose in unison with cover crops. However, if we employ a suite of measures to reduce or mitigate the losses from fertilizers, etc., then additively the cover crops can increase sequestration levels rather than just mitigation loss. So we must consider N2O leakage, the other greenhouse gases, effect on negative emissions. And that's just one example in terms of the type of work and the type of, I suppose, analysis of various measures in terms of their trade-offs and synergies with multiple objectives, which both our speakers will deal with today. In terms of EJP soil, translating scientific results for stakeholders is a key objective, and we're working in 5 key areas: sustainable soil management, so management options evaluation, evaluation of threats mitigation, and the status and role of biodiversity. Climate change mitigation, so sequestering carbon, the potential, the trade-offs with NNP, and the NRV methodology. If we think about climate change adaptation, so evaluating different measures that will be important in the future as the climate changes, etc. Assessing and monitoring the framework and indicators, if we think about the soil health law, innovative methods for data acquisition in terms of those reporting responsibilities, and then fostering adoption, so tools for evaluation, tools to support farmers, advisors like yourselves, tools for stakeholder engagement, and incentives and policy evaluation. And our stakeholders are many. We have everybody from you as advisors, policymakers, researchers, farmers, and the wider agri-industry. And then finally, I suppose to today's agenda, we'll, as I've said from the outset, we'll have 2 speakers. The first speaker will deal with an inventory of sustainable soil management practices, and the second speaker will talk about trade-off analysis in agricultural management strategies. After each presentation, we'll take about 15 minutes for questions, and please use the question and answer function rather than the chat. So it's better if you use the Q&A. And the vice chairperson from EUFRAS, Anita, will conclude with some final remarks. So without further ado,